American Baller, where we focus on all things NFL. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell for future videos. Following the 120th meeting of the Red River Rivalry, one of the greatest rivalries in all of college football between Texas and Oklahoma, many were confused why Texas players planted a flag in the middle of the field on top of Baker Mayfield's jersey. Today, we'll recap the latest edition of the Red River Rivalry, answer the question of why Texas is still hung up on Mayfield, take a look back at Baker's time in Oklahoma, and finally reminisce on the flag plant of his own. Heading into this year's rivalry game between Texas and Oklahoma, it was a highly touted matchup, with Texas coming into the game as the top-ranked team in the country, while Oklahoma was ranked 18th. This was hyped up as one of the best matchups of a loaded slate of games. Early on, it appeared as if we may have an upset on our hands, with Oklahoma holding a 3-0 lead when the first quarter came to an end. However, in the second quarter, the Longhorns finally showed up to play and completely dominated their opponents on both sides of the ball. By the time the teams headed into the locker room for halftime, Texas held a dominant 21-3 lead. The third quarter turned out to be another defensive battle, with the Longhorns being the only team to score, able to muster just 3 points. However, after a 10-point fourth quarter, Texas came out by a final score of 34-3. This was an absolute beatdown on both sides of the ball. On defense, Texas only allowed Oklahoma to pass midfield after the first quarter just once. Along with this, their defensive unit held the Sooners to just 237 yards for the entire game and forced 2 fumbles. On offense, the Longhorns' balanced attack was far too much for Oklahoma to handle. Quinn Ewers torched their secondary for 199 yards and a touchdown, along with a score on the ground on 29 passing attempts. Along with this, Quintravian held it down for Texas on the ground, rushing for 118 yards and a touchdown on only 13 carries. Following the game, Longhorns players added insult to the injury, pushing their flag through a Baker Mayfield jersey and planting it in the 50-yard line. People quickly took notice that it was Mayfield's jersey that was used in the celebration, despite him not playing for the school in nearly 7 years. When asked how he felt about his jersey being used in the disrespect of his alma mater, he took it in stride, saying, "That's just a kid from Austin, Texas that went to Oklahoma and won his last 2 Red Rivers games, being rent-free in their heads for almost a decade now. So yeah, it's a good feeling." However, one of the Texas players who planted the flag, Anthony Hill Jr., said that it had nothing to do with Mayfield specifically, saying, "A fan had gave me that jersey, just a random Texas fan. That was just the first jersey that I had that was OU, so we just kinda used that. No hate for Baker Mayfield. I'm actually a big fan. I watched him play in college. There's no hate. That was just the first jersey I'd seen, so we're just gonna leave it at that." Before he won 2 editions of the Red River Rivalry, Mayfield had a very uphill battle in his collegiate career. Despite a very impressive 2-year run as a starting quarterback, he flew under the radar of college scouts. He was a 3-star recruit, ranked the 69th best quarterback in the 2013 recruiting class. He received some offers from Division I programs, but he was far from living his childhood dreams of playing for the Sooners. He was offered scholarships by Florida Atlantic, New Mexico, Rice, and Washington State. He later said that he could have easily gone to Florida Atlantic, but his dad pushed him to bet on himself and walk on at a bigger school. This is exactly what he did and walked on at Texas Tech. Even though he was a walk-on, it didn't take long for him to wow the coaching staff. Mayfield made history as the first walk-on freshman to start in a Week 1 game. He proved the coach's gutsy decision right in his first collegiate start. In the matchup against Southern Methodist, Mayfield took care of business, throwing for 413 yards and 4 touchdowns, along with the score on the ground. After leading the Red Raiders to a 5-0 record in his first 5 starts, things got a little tougher for Mayfield, suffering a knee injury that kept him sidelined for the next month. Texas Tech got off to a slow start when he returned to action, losing 3 straight games against Big 12 opponents, one of them being Texas. It was clear that Mayfield was still a bit shaken up from his knee injury and was playing well below the standard he set for himself during the first half of the season. Despite his freshman year ending on a bit of a sour note, this was still an insanely impressive campaign for Baker. It's rare that a walk-on even sees the field in their freshman season at the quarterback position, let alone at a program like Texas Tech. While he was only able to suit up in 8 games, he still recorded 2,315 yards, 12 touchdowns and 9 interceptions through the air, and 190 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Following this impressive freshman season, Mayfield made the decision to live out his childhood dreams and play for Oklahoma. However, college football was set up much differently in 2014 than it is now. As a result of him transferring, he was forced to sit out the entire year, leading to him missing the entirety of the 2014 season. Despite this, after spending an entire year watching from the sidelines, he was more than ready to prove himself once again when his name was called to take the reins at the quarterback position in 2015. Similar to his start at Texas Tech, Mayfield showed out in his debut when the Sooners took on Akron. He finished the contest with 388 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, along with a rushing score. He rattled off 4 wins in his first 4 starts. However, his first loss came in the Red River Rivalry against Texas. But this was the only loss that Oklahoma suffered in the regular season. Outside of their game against Texas, Mayfield tormented Big 12 defenses, including a revenge game against his former team where he threw for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 63-27 win. After winning the Big 12 and finishing the regular season with an 11-1 record, the Sooners earned the 4th seed in the college football playoff. They were forced to match up against top-seeded Clemson in the first round of the playoffs, taking them on in the Orange Bowl. This was a matchup between 2 future starting NFL quarterbacks, with Deshaun Watson starting for the Tigers. Mayfield and the Sooners were outmatched and fell by a final score of 37-17. While this was another season for Baker that ended on a sour note, he once again made history, leading Oklahoma to their first playoff berth. He finished the season throwing for 3,700 yards, 36 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions, while completing 68.1% of his passes, leading the Big 12 in both passing touchdowns and completion percentage. This earned him the title of Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. Following this incredible debut at Oklahoma, the Sooners did not get the season off on the right foot at all. They were ranked as the 3rd best team in the country and took on a talented 15th ranked Houston in Week 1. Shockingly, the Sooners fell by a final score of 33-23. This loss dropped them all the way down to 14th the following week. After an easy get-right game against Louisiana Monroe, they fell once again in Week 3, this time to Ohio State in devastating fashion. With 2 losses to their name in just 3 weeks, it was clear that the Sooners' hopes to return to the playoffs for a second straight season had come and gone. However, this loss to Ohio State was the final time that Oklahoma was defeated the entire season. Mayfield was able to get his first career win against Texas, and he was also on the winning side of one of the greatest duels between 2 quarterbacks in college football history. This matchup took place when Mayfield made a return to Jones AT&T Stadium to take on Texas Tech. This was far from as easy of a win as it was a year prior. This mainly came as a result of the Red Raiders' new quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. This game was an absolute shootout, but Mayfield and the Sooners came out on top by a final score of 66-59. Baker finished the contest with 5,454 yards and 7 touchdowns through the air on only 36 passing attempts. In comparison, Mahomes threw for 734 yards and 5 touchdowns on 88 attempts. This is one of the highest scoring games in NCAA history, and once again proved Mayfield was one of the most talented quarterbacks that college football had to offer. Oklahoma's season ended with a 35-19 win over Auburn in the Sugar Bowl. Mayfield once again finished the year with a very impressive stat line, throwing for 3,965 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, while completing 70.9% of his passes. This completion percentage went on to be the best in all of college football in the 2016 season. After having their playoff hopes squashed so early in the 2016 season, Mayfield and the Sooners were on a revenge tour in 2017. After a dominant win in Week 1 against UTEP, they took on second-ranked Ohio State on the road. Despite losing by 21 points just a year prior, the Sooners were able to flip the script, taking the game by a final score of 31-16. Mayfield torched a very talented Buckeye defense that included players like Denzel Ward, Nick Bosa, and Chase Young for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns. After the game, Mayfield took Oklahoma's team flag from one of the cheerleaders and planted it firmly in the middle of Ohio State's logo on the 50-yard line. An absolutely notorious celebration, and what makes it very ironic that Hill Jr. was coincidentally given Baker's jersey to plant the flag through in Texas's celebration after taking down Oklahoma. Just 2 games following their elite showing against Ohio State, Oklahoma was stunned at home in a game against Iowa State where they fell by a final score of 38-31. After this loss, they fell to 12th in the top 25 rankings, and it was clear they would have to win out to have a chance of making the playoffs. Towards the tail end of the regular season, Mayfield potentially disrespected a team even worse than Ohio State. This came in a game against Kansas. Before the contest, Jayhawks players refused to shake Mayfield or his teammates' hands. It was clear that he took this to heart, and this lit a fire in him. He spent the rest of the game doing everything in his power to demoralize the Jayhawks. Things came to a boiling point when a Kansas corner took a cheap shot on him after making a pass. Following a 3-yard touchdown to Mark Andrews, Mayfield was seen taunting Kansas and grabbing his crotch. Oklahoma finished the season with an 11-1 record and took down TCU in the Big 12 championship 41-17. This secured them a second trip to the playoffs, this time taking on third-seeded Georgia. In his final college football game, Mayfield was narrowly defeated by a final score of 54-48. However, he put on an incredible send-off performance, throwing for 287 yards and 2 touchdowns against an elite Bulldogs defense. In his senior year, Baker racked up 4,627 yards, 43 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions while completing 70.5% of his passes. He once again led the Big 12 in passing touchdowns and the entire NCAA in completion percentage. This earned him another Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year award, a unanimous All-American selection, and a Heisman Trophy. Thank you for tuning in to American Baller. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell for future videos.